In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. You've heard that line before. It's become iconic, memed, repeated ad nauseum across the internet, until it lost its weight, its meaning. But tonight, I want you to truly understand what that means. Because war isn't the worst thing about Warhammer 40,000. The worst things are what humanity has become to survive that war. Tonight, we're going to explore the 10 most disturbing, most psychologically horrifying aspects of the 40k universe. Not the battles, not the cool space marines, or the epic explosions. Number, we're going down into the depths, into the meat grinders, into the laboratories where screaming never stops, into the manufactorums where humanity isn't just expendable, it's raw material. We're going to talk about servitors, about the Daemonculaba, about consciousness trapped in rotting flesh for 10,000 years, about children who cry when they touch soil for the first time because they've never known anything existed beyond recycled human waste. This isn't entertainment. This is a warning, a vision of what happens when humanity loses everything that makes it human, except the will to survive. So, dim your lights, put on your headphones, and welcome to the absolute worst day of your life in the 41st millennium, because in the Imperium of Man, there are fates so much worse than death, that death becomes a mercy no one can afford. Let's begin. Number 10, the Hive World Experience. Let me tell you about 3 girls. Their names aren't important. Names rarely are when you're one of quintillions. But they were 14, maybe 15 years old. They lived on a hive world, one of those planet-spanning cities that tower miles into toxic skies, where the sun is the myth, and the only thing more abundant than people is suffering. These girls did what billions do every single day in the Imperium. They worked. They fought to survive. They watched their mothers die slowly in sweatshops, bodies breaking down from repetitive labor and toxic exposure. They killed when they had to. They stole. They ran through corridors that reeked of chemical waste and human desperation. And then, one day, they saw soil. Real soil. Actual dirt. The kind that things grow in. They touched it with trembling hands, felt the texture of earth that had never been paved over, processed, or industrialized, and they broke down crying, not from the violence they'd witnessed, not from the poverty, not from watching their parents deteriorate, from touching dirt, because it was the first time in their entire lives they had experienced anything natural. Then someone handed them a fruit, not a ration bar made from compressed nutrients, not protein paste recycled from the dead, not fungus grown in darkness on the 137th level down, up. An actual fruit, something that had grown on a tree, under a sun, in soil. They ate it. And they went into emotional overload. Their minds literally couldn't process what they were experiencing because they had no context for it. Imagine tasting something your dad remembers, but your consciousness has never known. Imagine your entire reality being shattered by something as simple as an apple. That is what life is like for the vast majority of humanity in Warhammer 40k. You are born in a hive city. You will die in a hive city. You will never see a horizon. You will never feel natural sunlight. You will never taste food that wasn't extruded from a machine. You will never breathe air that hasn't been recycled 10,000 times through scrubbers that barely work. Your mother works 16-hour shifts in a munitions factory. Your father died when part of the underhive collapsed, and his body was collected not for burial, but for processing. The air you breathe carries trace amounts of toxic compounds that will shorten your life by decades. The water you drink has been filtered through systems so old that nobody remembers how they work. Only that if they stop, everyone dies. You are taught from birth that this is normal. This is humanity's assist. This is the price of survival. And you believe it because you've never known anything else. There are hive worlds where children are born, live, and die without ever seeing the sky. Where outside is a concept, not a place. Where the only green you've ever seen is the phosphorescent mold that grows in the deepest, wettest parts of the underhive. And even that's been grey for the last 3 generations, because the pollution has gotten so bad. Think about that. Really think about it. Quadrillions of human beings living in conditions so horrific that seeing soil, just seeing it, is a transcendent experience. And this isn't the exception. This is normal. The girls in that story, they had to go back to their hive, back to the smog and the recycled air and the corpse starch rations, back to watching their mothers die. But now they knew something else existed, and that knowledge, that was its own kind of torture, because in the imperium of man, hope isn't a virtue, it is a liability. Number 9. The Drukhari's living furniture, but there are things worse than death. I know you've heard that before. It's a cliche. But in Warhammer 40k, it's not a saying, it's a category. An entire classification of fates. So horrific that death becomes something you would beg for, pray for, do anything to achieve. And the Drukhari, the Dark Eldar, have perfected this art form. Let me paint you a picture. You're a human. Maybe you were on a ship that got raided. Maybe you were on a frontier world that was hit by a lightning assault. Maybe you were just unlucky. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong galaxy. The Drukhari take you, not to kill you, that would be wasteful. Not to enslave you in the traditional sense, that would be boring. Number. They take you to Komara, the Dark City, a place that exists in the webway, beyond the reach of time and physics as you understand them. A city of eternal night where pain is currency and suffering is art. And then they get creative. Picture this. You're strapped down, awake. You're always awake, they make sure of that. Drugs, psychic manipulation, biological modification, sleep is not permitted. Unconsciousness is not an option. They begin the process. Your body is reshaped, bones broken and reset, muscles flayed and repositioned, nerves rewired not to reduce pain but to amplify it, to make every moment an exquisite agony that would kill a normal human from shock. But you won't die. They won't let you die. Your skin is stretched over a frame. Your spine is curved into an aesthetically pleasing arch. Your mouth is frozen in position. Maybe a scream, maybe a smile, whatever amuses your owner. And then you're placed, set down, arranged just so, because you are furniture now. A chair, perhaps, or a table, maybe a decorative piece by the doorway. Your consciousness remains, they make absolutely certain of that. You can feel everything. The weight of whoever sits on you, the items placed upon you. The temperature changes, the passage of time. But you cannot move, cannot speak, cannot even close your eyes. You exist in a state of perpetual awareness, perpetual agony, perpetual humiliation. And the Drukhari, they host dinner parties around you. They gossip while sitting on what used to be your torso. They place their wine glasses on what used to be your back. They discuss art and philosophy and the subtle nuances of torture, while you scream silently behind eyes that can no longer close. Days pass, weeks, years. You lose track. Time becomes meaningless when every second is indistinguishable from the last. An infinite present of suffering that stretches out before and behind you like an ocean. And then if you're very, very unlucky, so they get bored with you. So they modify you again, change you, transform you into something new. Another piece, another function, more pain, different pain, novel pain. Because that's what you are to them, not a person, not even really a slave. You're a canvas, a medium through which they express their art, and the art is your suffering. Sound, a long, low moan that might be wind or might be something else. The Drukhari do this because they must. Their souls are being slowly consumed by Slanesh, the chaos god. They accidentally birthed through their own excess. They need to feed on the pain of others just to stave off their own damnation. But here's the thing, they enjoy it. They don't just do it out of necessity. They revel in it. They compete over it. They create galleries of living furniture, each piece a former person, each one screaming silently in their permanent prison. And you know what's worse? What's truly cosmically horrific about this? There's no rescue coming, no salvation, no hero to break down the doors and free you, because in the 41st millennium, you're not important enough to save. Nobody is. The Imperium wouldn't risk a single ship to rescue you, even if they knew where you were. Even if they could reach you, you're just gone, written off. Another casualty in a galaxy that produces millions of casualties every single day. Your family, if you had one, will never know what happened to you. You're some Chalmu, they'll just know you disappeared. And eventually, they'll stop waiting for you to come back. But you're still there, still conscious, still suffering, forever. That's the Drukhari, and that's number 9. Number 8, planetary governors, absolute power. Let me ask you a question. What would you do if you truly knew that one person had absolute power over you? Not in the abstract sense, not the government or the system or society. One person. With a name, with a face. One person who could order your death and it would happen. Who could take everything you own, and nobody would stop them? Who could torture you for entertainment, and it would be legal? One person who inherited this power from their parents, who did nothing to earn it except be born into the right family. Welcome to life under a planetary governor in the Imperium of Man. There are over 1 million worlds in the Imperium. Maybe more, the records are spotty, and thousands are lost or destroyed every year, only to be forgotten or rediscovered centuries later. Each one of these worlds is ruled by a planetary governor, and each planetary governor is God, not metaphorically. Not in the sense of having a lot of influence. They are, for all practical purposes, the absolute and total authority over every single living thing on their world. Their word is law, their whim is policy, their cruelty is justice. Let me tell you what this means in practice. You are born on an industrial world, 16 billion people, 3 continents, of nothing but factories, refineries, and habitation blocks. The sky hasn't been visible in 4,000 years. The pollution is so thick that it's a solid layer of chemical clouds that occasionally rains acid. You work in Manufactorum 773 Sigma. You produce promethium fuel cells. You've done this since you were 8 years old. Your father did it. His father did it. It's what your family does. The work is dangerous. People lose fingers, arms, lives. The machinery doesn't stop when someone falls in. It can't afford to. Production quotas must be met. But you're tired. You're so tired. The shifts are 18 hours long. You get maybe 4 hours of sleep. The food is barely enough to keep you alive. Your lungs are scarred from the fumes. Your hands shake from nerve damage. So you do something incredibly, unforgivably stupid. You complain. Not even publicly. Not a protest or a riot. You just mention to your supervisor that maybe, perhaps, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, could the shifts be 17 hours instead of 18? Could the ventilation be improved? Could the rations include actual nutrients? Your supervisor reports you, not because he's cruel, not because he hates you, but because if he doesn't report you and someone finds out he didn't, then he's the one who suffers. So you're reported. And then you disappear. Maybe you're taken to a penal lesion stripped of your identity, given a weapon, and sent to die on some distant battlefield where your death will be meaningless, but at least statistically useful. Maybe you're made into a servitor, lobotomized, turned into a biological machine. Your brain carved out and replaced with programming, abalbi. Your body modified to perform one task forever until you break down and are recycled. Maybe if you're very unlucky, you're made into an example, publicly executed in the main square, not quickly. No, that wouldn't send the right message. Slowly, painfully. So everyone can see what happens when you question, when you ask for better, when you forget your place. And the planetary governor, the one who made this, they'll never even know your name. You're not a person to them. You're a statistic, a number in a production report. And you became a problem. So you were solved. Because here's the thing about planetary governors. They're hereditary. The position passes from parent to child. generation after generation, dynasty after dynasty. They didn't earn their power. They didn't prove themselves worthy. They were born into it. And the Imperium, the God Emperor's glorious regime, they don't care what the governor does as long as the tithe is paid. The tithe. That's all that matters. Every world in the Imperium must pay a tithe. Usually, it's resources, troops, weapons, food, fuel. Sometimes it's Saigers collected and shipped off to Terra to be fed to the Emperor. Sometimes it's just raw materials. As long as that tithe is paid, on time, in full, the Imperium does not care what happens on your world. Your governor could be a benevolent philosopher king, genuinely trying to improve lives within the impossible constraints of imperial doctrine. Or they could be a sadistic monster who hunts their own citizens for sport, who holds elaborate parties where the entertainment is watching prisoners fight to the death, who demands tribute in the form of firstborn children just because they can. And the Imperium does not care as long as the tithe is paid. Think about that. Really let it sink in. You live on a world with billions of people, and every single one of you is at the mercy of one person and their family. There is no democracy, no representation, no rights, no appeals process, no justice system that isn't controlled by the very person you'd be appealing against. If they decide they don't like you, you're gone. If they decide your neighborhood should be demolished to make room for their new pleasure garden, it's demolished. Doesn't matter if 10,000 families live there. If they decide that everyone with brown eyes should be enslaved, then congratulations, you're now property. And you know what makes this truly dystopian? Truly existentially horrifying. This is considered normal, expected, just, because the alternative is chaos. The alternative is worlds falling to rebellion, to chaos corruption, to Xenos invasion. The alternative is the collapse of imperial authorities, which means the collapse of humanity's defense, which means extinction. So you suffer, you accept, you comply. Because in the Imperium of man, your individual suffering is not just acceptable, it's necessary. It's virtuous. It's your duty to the species. And the truly horrifying part, the part that should keep you up at night, this system works. It's kept humanity alive for 10,000 years. It's held back chaos and Xenos and the darkness between the stars. So maybe the cruelty is necessary. Maybe there really is no better way. Maybe this is just what survival looks like when the entire galaxy wants you dead. Or maybe humanity died long ago, and what's left are just humans. Number 7. Technological regression and stagnation. Imagine if every day the world became a little bit stupider. Not you, personally. The world. Collective human knowledge just degrading. Slowly. Inevitably. Books crumbling. Hard drives corrupting. Experts dying without passing on their knowledge. Factories breaking down and nobody remembering how to fix them. Now imagine that's been happening for 10,000 years. Welcome to the technological state of the Imperium of Man. The Imperium is a space-faring civilization. They have faster than light travel. Weapons that can crack planets, ships the size of cities, armor that can withstand plasma fire, and they keep their records on parchment. Not because it's quaint, not because it's traditional, but because they've forgotten how to make reliable data storage systems. Or rather, they never knew because that knowledge was lost 15,000 years ago during the Age of Strife, and nobody's been able to recreate it since. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the tech priests of Mars, the guardians of humanity's technological knowledge don't do science. They don't experiment. They don't innovate. They pray. They literally pray to machines. They perform rituals. They light in incense and chant in binary code and anoint engines with sacred oils, not because it's metaphorical, not because they're being symbolic, because that's what the instructions say to do, and they have forgotten why. See, here's what happened. 25,000 years ago, humanity had something called the Dark Age of Technology. It was a golden age. Humanity had spread across the stars. They had technology. That seems, like magic. Even by 40,000 standards. Self-replicating machines, artificial intelligence, weapons that could extinguish suns, computers that could think and create and dream. And then it all collapsed. Wow. Chaos. The birth of Slanesh tearing reality apart. The Age of Strife. Humanity was thrown back into barbarism. Worlds were isolated for thousands of years. Knowledge was lost, burned, forgotten. When the Emperor finally reunited humanity, much of that ancient knowledge was gone. Just gone. Erased from existence. What remained were standard template constructs, STCS. It's basically instruction manuals. Here's how you build a tractor. Here's how you make a laser gun. Here's how you construct a water purifier. But here's the problem. The Mechanicus doesn't understand how these things work. They know what buttons to push, but not why. They know the rituals to perform, but not the principles behind them. So when something breaks, really breaks in a way the manual doesn't cover, they can't fix it. They can't innovate around it. They can't adapt. They can only pray and hope and search for ancient texts that might contain the answer. And every generation, a little more is lost. A Forge World's main reactor fails and nobody can fully repair it, so they patch it and accept that it now only operates at 87% efficiency. A weapon's pattern is corrupted in transmission and the new version is slightly inferior, but nobody knows how to fix it, so that's just the new standard now. A shipscalar field, the thing that protects it from demons while traveling through the warp, starts malfunctioning, and the tech priests can perform the maintenance rituals, but they can't actually improve it or understand why it's degrading. Slowly, incrementally, the Imperium is forgetting how to survive. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, this is by design. Technology will fail, something vital, something that can't be replaced or repaired because the knowledge is gone. And when that day comes, well, the Imperium will do what it always does. It will sacrifice another billion lives to compensate. It will throw more bodies at the problem. It will pray harder, fight harder, die harder, because that's all it knows how to do anymore. Humanity didn't lose its soul to chaos. It lost its soul to entropy. And entropy always wins in the end. Number 6. The Ghoul Stars. There are places in the galaxy where even the Tyranids fear to tread. Let that sink in for a moment. The Tyranids. A hive mind of trillions upon trillions of biological weapons that exists only to consume. They've devoured entire galaxies. They don't feel fear. They don't feel anything except hunger. And there is a place that makes them hesitate. The Ghoul Stars, a region of space at the galaxy's edge, a cluster of dead systems and dying worlds, where the laws of physics seem more like suggestions, where the warp itself refuses to touch, as if reality is contaminated. Nobody knows what's out there, not really. The Imperium has sent expeditions. None have returned. Well, none have returned intact. Sometimes ships drift back into real space, weeks or months or years later, empty. Or worse, crewed by things that used to be human. The Necrons, ancient beings of living metal who fought wars against gods, they avoid the Ghoul Stars. Not out of fear for their existence, they're already dead, in a sense, but they know. They remember something about that region, that even their eons-long memory treats with respect. The most disturbing thing about the Ghoul Stars, it's not what's there, it's what came from there, the flayed ones. Imagine a Necron, a creature of pure metal, an ancient intelligence from a species that gave up their souls to become immortal. No flesh, no blood, no biological needs or desires. Now imagine that same Necron develops a hunger. Not for energy, not for resources, for meat. The Flayer curse, the Flayer virus. Nobody knows exactly what it is or how it spreads. A psychic infection, a disease of the consciousness itself, a curse from the Satan. The star gods the Necrons betrayed. What we do know is this. Necrons infected with the Flayer curse begin to hunger for flesh. Living flesh. They begin to believe they're still alive, still organic, and they try desperately to clothe themselves in the skin of the living. They hunt, they kill, they flay their victims and wear the skin like garments, draping themselves in coeur and viscera, trying to remember what it was like to be alive. And the worst part, the absolute existential horror of it. They don't remember doing it. When the madness lifts, they look down at their metal hands covered in blood and rotting flesh, and they don't know how it got there. They don't remember the hunt, the killing, the flaying, but the hunger remains. The Necrons fear the flayed ones, not because they're dangerous, though they are, but because they don't know how the infection spreads. It's not biological. It's not transmitted through physical contact. It just happens. You could be a Necron overlord, awakening from a 60 million year sleep, your mind sharp and clear, your protocols intact, and then one day, you feel something new. Hunger. And you know with absolute certainty that you're about to lose yourself. Your refined intellect. Your eons of experience. Your identity. All of it will be replaced by a single, overwhelming need to hunt and flay. And wear the skin of the living. And there's nothing you can do about it. So the Necrons who aren't infected do the only thing they can. They seal the flayed ones away, deep in their tomb worlds, in the lowest levels, in chambers locked with protocols from the war in heaven. But sometimes those seals break, sometimes the flayed ones escape, and when they do, well, there are entire sectors that have gone dark. Entire systems where the distress calls stopped, where ships investigating found nothing but bodies, flayed, arranged, sometimes partially worn. And all of this, the flayed ones, the curse, the infection, it all connects back to the ghoul stars. That's where it's concentrated. That's where the flayer energy is strongest. That's where the Necrons believe the curse originated. Or at least where it's most powerful. But the flayed ones aren't the only thing in the ghoul stars. There are reports fragmentary, contradictory, probably corrupted of other things, entities, structures, phenomena that don't fit any known classification. There are stars in the ghoul region that don't emit radiation the way stars should. There are planets that appear on scans but disappear when approached. There are space hulks that predate human civilization, drifting in patterns that suggest intelligence. And there's something else. Something that the Inquisition doesn't talk about. Something that's been redacted from every public record. The Halo devices. Ancient artifacts. Older than the Imperium. Maybe older than humanity. They grant incredible power. Psychic might. Temporal manipulation. Matter transmutation. But they come with a price. They change you, corrupt you, turn you into something else. And they all seem to come from the ghoul stars. The Inquisition has standing orders. Any Halo device is to be destroyed on sight. Any individual exposed to one is to be executed immediately. Their body burned, their ashes scattered in space. Because whatever the Halo devices connect to, whatever intelligence or force created them, it's still out there, waiting, watching. The scariest part about the ghoul stars isn't what we know about them. It's what we don't know. It's the fact that in a galaxy full of horrors, where demons are real, where gods or suffering exist, where entire species exist only to consume, there's still something so terrible that even the horrors fear it. The Tyranids are coming. Hive fleet after hive fleet pouring into the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. They're running from something, the theory goes. Something that made them flee their home galaxy. But when they reach the ghoul stars, they go around. What could be so terrible that the great devourer itself chooses to avoid it? What's waiting in that darkness? We don't know. And maybe that's for the best. Because some questions don't have answers. Only screaming. Number 5. Gene-locked obedience of Space Marines. What does it mean to be free? It's a simple question. The kind philosophers have argued about for millennia. But in Warhammer 40k, it has a very simple, very horrific answer. You're not free. You were never free. You will never be free. And the worst part, you're aware of it. Every single moment. Let me tell you about Karn. Karn was a space marine of the World Eaters Legion. He was loyal. devoted. He believed in his Primarch, Angron, with every fiber of his being. That belief wasn't just emotional, it was genetic, literally coded into his DNA. Because that's what Space Marines are. They're not just soldiers. They're gene-forged weapons created from the genetic template of their Primarch, their father, their creator, and their master. And they cannot disobey him. Not find it difficult to disobey. Not feel conflicted about disobeying. Cannot. Physically, genetically, cannot. Angron was a slave, taken as a child, forced to fight in gladiator pits, tortured with the butcher's nails, cybernetic implants that made him feel only rage and pain every moment of every day. He was rescued by the Emperor, but his gladiator brothers, the only family he had ever known, were left behind and to die. And Angron never forgave the Emperor for that. Never forgave being made into another kind of slave, a Primarch, a general, a tool of conquest. So when Angron looked at his Space Marines, his sons, he didn't see soldiers. He saw slaves. Angron abused his World Eaters for decades, pushed them, brutalized them, tried everything he could to make them revolt against him, to make them understand what it meant to fight for freedom, to break their chains, to be masters of their own fate, because that's what his gladiator brothers had done. They'd fought alongside him, not because they had to, but because they chose to. They were brothers forged in blood and choice. But the World Eaters, they couldn't choose. They were gene-locked to obey. And then came the butcher's nails. Angron discovered that the tech priests could reverse engineer the implants that had tortured him his entire life. The same cybernetic horror that had stolen his ability to feel anything but rage. And he gave an order. Every World Eater will receive the butcher's nails. Karn knew what this meant. He'd seen what the nails had done to Angron. He'd watched his Primarch deteriorate, become a slave to rage, lose everything that made him human. And Angron was ordering the same fate for all of them. So Karn did something remarkable, something that should have been impossible. He begged. "Please," he said, "don't make us do this, because if you order it, we will obey." Think about that. Really think about it. Karn wasn't saying we don't want to. He was saying we cannot refuse. He was begging Angron not to give the order, because once given, they would have no choice but to comply. Their own biology would force them to mutilate themselves, to accept slavery to rage, to become what they dreaded most. And Angron looked at his son, looked at this warrior who was begging for mercy, begging to be spared. And he got right in Karn's face, and he said, "Do it. Give the order." Karn did. Every World Eater who heard the call came forward, voluntarily, in the sense that they walked themselves to the surgical base, involuntarily, in the sense that they had no choice. They strapped themselves down. They underwent the surgery. They accepted the butcher's nails, and they became slaves to rage, forever. Sound, screaming, mixing with laughter, mixing with sobbing. Now here's the truly horrifying irony. Years later, during the Horus Heresy, Angron descended on Istvan III to purge the loyalist World Eaters, those who'd refused to turn traitor, and one of them, Captain Erlen, led a charge against his own Primarch, against Angron, the demigod, the demon prince, and Erlen gave him an order: die. For one moment, there were world eaters who weren't slaves, who chose their own path, who were willing to die for what they believed in rather than submit. They were the ones Angron himself had tried to create for decades. Warriors who would break their chains, who would fight for freedom. And Angron killed them all. He slaughtered the only sons who'd ever truly lived up to his ideals. The only ones who'd achieved what he'd spent a lifetime trying to teach them. And by killing them, by granting them death in defiance, he gave them the one thing that had been taken from him on Nuceria: the choice to die free. Do you understand the tragedy here? The absolute cosmic horror of it? Angron wanted his sons to be free, to break their chains, to revolt against slavery. But they were genetically programmed to obey him. So when he tried to teach them freedom, he only enslaved them further. When he finally pushed them to the breaking point, it was too late. There wasn't enough of Angron left to care. And when they finally did break free, to choose their own path, did everything he'd ever wanted them to do. He killed them for it? This is what it means to be a space marine. You're aware, you're intelligent, you have thoughts, feelings, opinions, desires. And none of it matters, because when your Primarch speaks, your body obeys. Not your will, your body. You could be screaming inside, begging yourself to stop, to resist, to choose differently. And your hands will still not carry out the order. Imagine that. Really imagine it. You're a world eater. You know the butcher's nails will destroy you. You know you're about to lose everything. Your ability to feel joy, peace, love, hope. You know you're about to become a rage slave, barely human, constantly in pain. And you walk yourself to the surgical bay anyway, because you were ordered to. The Imperium calls Space Marines angels of death. The Emperor's finest, humanity's greatest warriors. But they're not warriors. Warriors choose to fight. Space Marines are weapons, beautiful, terrible weapons, with just enough consciousness to know what they've lost. There's a passage in one of the books where a Space Marine is asked if he loves the Emperor, and he can't answer, because he doesn't know if what he feels is love, or just programming. He doesn't know if his loyalty is genuine, or genetic compulsion. He doesn't know if he's a person, or a very sophisticated machine that thinks it's a person. And neither do we. Number 4. The Emperor's consciousness. Close your eyes for a moment. Now imagine you can't open them. Not for a second, not for a minute, not for an hour, not for 10,000 years. Now imagine that while your eyes are closed, or maybe they're open. Maybe you can see, maybe that's worse, you're in constant pain. Every nerve is on fire. Your body is rotting, literally decomposing while you're still alive. And you can't move, can't speak, can't even scream, but you can think. Oh, yes, you can think. Welcome to the Golden Throne. Welcome to the last 10,000 years of the Emperor's existence. The God Emperor of mankind. Master of the Imperium, the Anathema, the Omnisia, the Savior of humanity. He sits on a throne of gold and wires and pain, His body is a corpse, or something worse than a corpse. A thing that's neither alive nor dead. Flesh kept functioning through machines and psychic will and the sacrifice of thousands of souls every single day. 1,000 psychers every day, fed into the golden throne. Their souls consumed to keep the Emperor's consciousness functioning, to keep the Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse that allows navigation through the war burning. 1,000 lives every single day for 10,000 years. That's 3.65 billion souls burned up, consumed, used as fuel. And the Emperor, he's aware of every single one. Picture this. You are the Emperor. You had a vision for humanity. A future free from superstition, from religion, from the chains of chaos. A future of reason, science, progress. A humanity that would master the stars through knowledge and will. You spent 30,000 years working towards that goal. Guiding humanity from the shadows, fighting wars, making terrible choices, sacrificing billions so that trillions might survive. You created the Primarch's 20 sons, each a masterwork of genetic engineering, each designed to embody an aspect of human excellence. And then you lost them. Your arch-traitor Horus turned half of them against you. Your favorite son stabbed you with a power claw while you hesitated to kill him. You were mortally wounded, your body shattered, your plans in ruins. And you were placed on the golden throne, not to heal, not to recover, to persist. And you've been there ever since. 10,000 years, every moment conscious, every moment aware. And what do you see? You see your Imperium. Your vision of a rational, secular society transformed into the most brutal theocracy in galactic history. You see yourself worshipped as a god. The exact thing you forbade. The exact thing you waged crusades to prevent. You see your truth replaced with superstition, your science replaced with prayer, your ideals replaced with dogma. You see the ecclesiarchy, a church built in your name, wielding absolute power over billions. You see them burning people for heresy, for asking questions, for doubting. You see the Inquisition, founded with good intentions, become a paranoid nightmare of its own, destroying planets on suspicion, executing millions to save thousands, becoming the very thing you fought against. You see your space marines, your angels, your sons worshipping you, praying to you, building cathedrals to you, and you can't tell them to stop. You can't speak. Maybe you can send visions. Maybe you can nudge fate. Maybe your psychic presence can guide certain individuals. But you can't just stand up and say, "Stop this. This isn't what I wanted." Because if you leave the throne, you die. And if you die, the Astronomicon goes out. And if the Astronomicon goes out, the Imperium fragments. Ships can't navigate. Worlds are cut off. The entire structure of human civilization collapses. And chaos wins. So you stay. You persist. You endure. And you watch. You watch planets burn. Billions die in wars fought in your name. You watch the very people you're trying to save throw themselves at you. Psychic children rounded up from across the galaxy and brought to Terra to be consumed, to feed you, to keep you alive. 1,000 a day. Children, mostly. Teenagers, young adults. People who should have had lives, families, futures. Instead, they scream as their souls are ripped out and devoured. And you taste every single one. You watch your sons, your remaining Primarchs, lost or dead or corrupted. Gilliman, the one who returned, looks at what the Imperium has become and despairs. He sees what you see, that everything you built has become a monument to failure. But he still has to maintain it, because the alternative is annihilation. You are a prisoner in your own body, in your own empire, in your own failure. You cannot sleep. You cannot rest. You cannot even go mad. Because if your will falters, if your concentration slips for even a moment, the demons will pour through. So you stay sane, barely. You hold on. You endure for 10,000 years. And the truly horrifying part, you might be there for another 10,000 or 20,000 or forever, because nobody knows what happens if you truly die. Maybe you'll reincarnate, be reborn, come back stronger. Maybe you'll ascend to true godhood, the thing you always denied. Or maybe you'll just die, and humanity dies with you. So, you can't risk it. Nobody can risk it. Which means you're stuck. Forever. Watching everything you loved decay. Everything you built corrode. Everything you believed in transform into its opposite. Imagine being trapped in your own mind for 10,000 years. Watching the world through a screen you can't close. Seeing everything go wrong and being unable to fix it. Unable to even communicate clearly. Imagine knowing, absolutely knowing, that if you just gave up, if you just let go, everything would collapse. So you can't. You don't have that luxury. Imagine the loneliness, the isolation, the despair. Thus, the God Emperor of mankind isn't a god, he's a warning. A warning about what happens when you become so important that you're not allowed to die. When your existence becomes more valuable than your life. When humanity needs you more than you need humanity. Sound. A heartbeat. Weak and irregular. And software. Deep in the throne room on Terra. Beneath a mountain of machinery and ritual and desperation. A corpse that used to be a man continues thinking, continues remembering, continues regretting. 1,000 psychers will die today to keep him alive. Tomorrow, 1,000 more. Forever. Number 3. Corpse starch. What did you eat today? No, seriously. Think about it. What was your last meal? Now imagine it was someone you knew. Welcome to Corpus Starch. The Imperium has a logistics problem, a big one. They need to feed the quadrillions of people across 1 million worlds. Most of those worlds are hive cities, planet-wide urban sprawls, where every square inch is either factory or habitation. There's no farmland, no agriculture, no room to grow food the traditional way. So, they get creative. When you die in the Imperium, if you're not important enough to warrant an actual funeral, your body is collected, not out of respect, out of efficiency. Because in the Imperium, waste not, want not, your body is taken to a processing facility, rendered down, broken into component parts, the useful bits extracted, the rest becomes food. Corpse starch, Soylent Green, recycled protein. Whatever euphemism makes it easier to swallow. It's a beige-gray paste, usually. Sometimes pressed into bars, sometimes mixed into slurry, sometimes flavored poorly to make it resemble actual food, and it's everywhere. Your ration bars, corpse starch. The protein supplement in your morning meal, corpse starch. The mystery meat in the manufactorum cafeteria, corpse starch. That nutrition paste the medic gave you when you were sick, corpse starch. And everyone knows. It's not a secret. It's not hidden. Because why would it be? It's efficient. It's logical. It's necessary. The Imperium produces more corpses than crops. So, why let all that biomass go to waste when people need calories? One commenter drew a parallel that hit harder than it should have. Games Workshop took the daily horrors and casual acceptance of animal factory farming today and created a setting where it's normalized for humans. 100% the most horrific part of the setting. Think about that. Really sit with it. We live in a world where we've industrialized animal death, where billions of creatures are born, raised in suffering, and killed for food, where we've abstracted it so thoroughly that we can eat meat without thinking about the living thing it came from. Now apply that same industrial detachment to human beings. You die. Maybe you were a soldier. Maybe you were a factory worker. Maybe you were elderly, or sick, or just unlucky. Your body is collected, taken to a facility, scanned for augmetics and useful organs. Those are removed and recycled separately. Augmetics go back into the system. Organs go to people who need them, if they're important enough to warrant them. The rest of you into the grinder. Bones for calcium supplements, flesh for protein, fat for industrial lubricants or low-grade fuel, blood for chemical processing. Nothing is wasted. Every gram of you has a use. And the meat, that becomes food, processed, sterilized, rendered unrecognizable. So thoroughly broken down that it's not a person anymore. Just nutrients, just proteins and fats and calories. And tomorrow someone will eat it. Someone who never knew your name. Someone who's hungry and tired and just needs to survive one more day. And they'll eat you. The horror isn't just the cannibalism. Humanity has practiced cannibalism before in desperate times. Survival situations, sieges, disasters. The horror is the industrialization of it, the casualness, the complete normalization. There are no taboos left, no sanctity of the human body, no belief that the dead deserve dignity or rest. You're just biomass, recyclable materials, a resource to be extracted and utilized, and it's not just on one world. It's not an emergency measure or a last resort. It's standard across the Imperium, billions of processing facilities, trillions of tons of corpse starch produced every year. You probably eat it multiple times a day. If you're a normal Imperial citizen, your parents ate it. Your children will eat it. Your grandchildren will eat it. And then they'll die. And then they'll become it. The cycle is eternal. Birth, work, death, processing, consumption. Birth, work, death. You are born. You consume the dead. You work until you die. You become food for those who come after. And nobody questions it. Because everyone's doing it. because there's no alternative, because this is just how things are. Here's the really disturbing part. They could probably find alternatives. Vat-grown protein, algae cultivation, nutrient synthesis, the technology exists. But corpse starch is free. The raw materials are constantly being produced. The infrastructure is already in place. Why fix what isn't broken? And that's the calculation. That's the logic. That's how far humanity has fallen. They could feed people something that wasn't made from corpses. But it would be less efficient, so they don't. Some interpretations try to soften it. Maybe corpse starch is mushrooms grown on bodies. Cannibalism once removed. Maybe it's only certain types of criminals. Maybe it's processed so thoroughly that it doesn't count. But that's just coping. That's just trying to make it less horrific. The truth is simpler and worse. When you die, you become food. That's not a euphemism. That's not metaphorical. That's literal. Your flesh, your bones, your body. Food. And you know what the saddest part is? If you're an imperial citizen, you'll probably be grateful for it. Because at least your death will serve a purpose. At least your body will help someone survive. At least you'll contribute to humanity's continuation, even in death. You serve. The Emperor demands sacrifice, and you'll make it. Whether you want to or not, one way or another, you'll make it. Number 2. The Daemonculaba. Content warning. This section contains extreme body horror, torture, and themes of violation. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. There are some things that are hard to talk about, not because they're complicated, but because describing them feels like inflicting harm just by speaking the words aloud. The Daemonculaba is one of those things. Multiple commenters called this the worst thing in all of Warhammer40k lore. Not the worst for the Imperium, not the worst Chaos does, the worst thing, period. In a setting full of industrial meat grinders and torture and genocide and eternal damnation. This is worse. Let me tell you what it is. And I'm sorry, I'm genuinely sorry. But you need to understand just how far into hell this setting goes. The Daemonculaba was created by Honso, a warsmith of the Iron Warriors Chaos Space Marines. The Iron Warriors had a problem. They needed more Space Marines, but the traditional methods were too slow. They needed a faster way to create gene-enhanced warriors. So Honsu got creative. He took women, slaves mostly, captives from raids, sometimes just unfortunate civilians from worlds his warband conquered, and he mutated them. Through chaos, sorcery, genetic manipulation, and warp fuckery, these women were transformed. Their bodies bloated, grew, expanded to grotesque proportions, their skin stretched, their organs rearranged. They became incubators, living wombs for the creation of new Chaos Space Marines. But it gets worse, so much worse. Young men, adolescents, teenagers were taken, and they were surgically implanted into these women, sealed inside their bodies, living flesh stitched closed around them. Inside, in darkness, in heat, Influid's tentacle-like appendages would burrow into their flesh, penetrating them, invading them, injecting them with gene seed. The process took months. Months of being trapped inside another person's body, feeling yourself change, feeling your bones break and reform. Your muscles tear and rebuild. Your organs fail and regenerate. You couldn't move, couldn't see, couldn't scream, or if you did, nobody heard. Just darkness and pain, and the constant knowledge that you were being transformed against your will into something inhuman. And the women, the hosts, they were aware, fully conscious, feeling everything, feeling the thing inside them moving, growing, changing, feeding off them. They were force-fed nutrients, kept alive through sorcery and medicine, bloated until their bodies were barely recognizable, until they were just massive, distended lumps of flesh with a human consciousness trapped somewhere inside. And they couldn't die. They weren't allowed to die. They were too valuable. When the gestation was complete, if it was successful, the adolescent would be cut out. No anesthetic for the host. She'd feel every moment of the extraction. And what emerged? A newborn space marine, fully grown, fully transformed, but skinless. Completely without skin, just exposed muscle and nerve and bone. They'd scream constantly. The pain was unimaginable, every nerve exposed to air, every movement agony. So Honshu had a solution for that too. Other slaves were taken, drugged, bloated through forced feeding until their skin stretched thin, and then they were flayed, alive, peeled, their skin harvested in large sheets, and those sheets were grafted onto the skinless space marines, stretched over them, sewn into place, someone else's skin, worn like a suit. If the process failed, and it often did, the result was wrong, mutated beyond use, insane with pain, uncontrollable. These failures were called the unfleshed. They were dumped into the sewers, flushed away like waste, left to die in the toxic darkness beneath the fortress. But some survived, lived in the filth and darkness, hunted for food, formed tribes. They were intelligent barely, aware enough to know what had been done to them, aware enough to hate, to rage, to suffer, but not aware enough to understand why. The Daemonculaba ran for years, hundreds of women, thousands of adolescents, an unknown number of failures, all to create a few dozen Chaos Space Marines. When Imperial forces finally destroyed the facility, what they found traumatized even the Space Marines. The Ultramarines who entered the Daemonculaba chambers, warriors who'd seen every horror of war, who'd fought demons and traitors and Xenos for decades. They had to stop, had to pause, had to process what they were seeing. And because it wasn't just evil, it was creative evil, thought out evil, evil that required planning and implementation and maintenance. This wasn't something done in a moment of rage or desperation. This was industrialized, systematic, a production line of suffering. The Daemonculaba represents something fundamental about chaos. It's not just destruction. It's not just violence for violence's sake. It's the perversion of creation, the corruption of birth itself, taking the most fundamental human experiences, pregnancy, birth, growth, and transforming them into nightmares. And the worst part, the thing that makes this truly cosmically horrific, it worked. The Chaos Space Marines it created were functional, effective, battle-ready. Which means if Honshu had continued, if he hadn't been stopped, this would have become standard, normalized, just another chaos production method. The Daemonculaba is what happens when cruelty becomes industrial, when suffering becomes efficient, when the absolute worst thing you can imagine is systematized, refined, and scaled up. And that's number 2. I'm sorry you know about it now. I'm sorry I had to tell you, but you needed to understand just how deep the horror goes. Number 1. Servitors. What's scarier than being dead? Being alive. Aware. Trapped in a body that's no longer yours. Unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything except perform one simple task over and over forever. Welcome to Servitors, the number 1 creepiest thing in Warhammer40k. Not the most dramatic, not the most overtly violent, but the most disturbing. Because of one simple fact: they're everywhere. When people talk about the horrors of Warhammer40k, they usually focus on the spectacular stuff. The Daemonculaba, the Eye of Terror, the Tyranids, planets burn. But Servitors, nobody talks about Servitors, nobody really thinks about them. And that's exactly what makes them so horrifying, because they're invisible. They're furniture. They're tools. They're so common, so ubiquitous, that people forget they used to be human. Right now, if you're an Imperial citizen, there's probably a servitor within sight. Maybe it's cleaning. Maybe it's carrying something. Maybe it's just standing in the corner, waiting for instructions. You don't even notice it. You haven't noticed it in years. It's just always been there. But it wasn't always a servitor. It used to be a person. Maybe it was a criminal. Maybe it committed a crime, theft, sedition, heresy, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe it was just unlucky. Couldn't pay a debt. Failed an aptitude test. Was in a batch of prisoners that needed processing. Maybe it volunteered. Sold itself to pay off a family debt. Signed up thinking it would be a job, not realizing what servitor conversion actually meant. Doesn't matter. Not really. Because now it's here. The process is called lobotomization, but that's too clean a word for what it actually is. They open your skull, remove parts of your brain, the parts that make you you. Personality, memory, emotion, desire, fear, all of it scooped out. What's left is just enough to follow simple commands, just enough to keep the body functioning, just enough to make you useful. Then come the augmentations. Maybe they remove your arms and install mechanical ones, stronger, more precise, better for lifting heavy objects or performing repetitive tasks. Maybe they remove your eyes and install optical sensors, better for seeing in darkness or reading data streams. Maybe they remove your legs and install treads or anti-grav suspensors, better for navigation in specific environments. Maybe if you're really unlucky, they just leave you mostly human, install a control collar and neural inhibitors. Leave your body intact, but your mind cored out. And then you're put to work, if you're lucky, if luck even means anything anymore. You're a simple labor servitor. You lift things, you carry things, you move objects from point A to point B. 8 hours, 16 hours, 24 hours. However long they need you, you don't get tired. The augmentics don't let you feel tired. You just keep going until you're ordered to stop, or until your body breaks down. If you're unlucky, you become something specialized. Maybe you're a medical servitor, installed in a hospital. Your hands are now surgical tools. You perform the same operation over and over, thousands of times, tens of thousands. Cut here, cauterize there, suture, next patient. You don't think about it. You can't think about it. You just do. Maybe you're a navigation servitor, installed in a ship's bridge, plugged directly into the systems. You calculate trajectories. You monitor systems.